yeah, thank you, Biro, for joining that interview or that questionnaire or whatever that discussion. It depends where we go to. What do you think? So, what are the biggest three challenges you faced as a project manager so far?
Well, I think that would be probably misalignment, one, toxic people in teams and companies, and poor goals. And to go one by one with each of these, I think misalignment and the lack of clear communication between one peers as well as stakeholders can lead to project failure. It's pretty obvious, right? Having questions like, why are we even doing this? Why was this prioritized? These are usually signals of signs of misalignment. The second point was toxic individuals in teams. It can be extremely destructive and lead to significant stalling in progress. Now, when I mean toxic individuals, I'm not referring to folk with an opinion and a voice. That's how it should be, right? So people should be able to express their thoughts and such. But I'm actually referring to individuals who bring no value to the team and project, yet disrupt and block. And then I would say the third would be, I would say, poor goals, structured. Well-structured execution can only be achieved with strong goals that everyone understands and can back through work structured and so on. So I would say those will have been my biggest challenges throughout my PM career.
What do you think is the project management landscape changing over in the next 5 years?
So I really like this question. I would say it's going to be less process heavy, more talent focused, and all of it aided by AI to kind of substitute for process purpose. If there's one thing I learned through my years of managing is that often tight processes actually inhibit talent and professional growth. I see the next managers as mentors that guide rather than gatekeepers that instruct. I would say the only downside of that will at times be, say, less performance. And I think that's where AI will aid both the project manager and the project team to improve to analysis and also recommendations. So yeah, I think the future, just to summarize, let's focus on the process, leave process guidance to AI, and more focus on talent development and people.
Okay. So do you think is that if I would say processes should be more flexible and adaptive, that this is something supporting this point of view?
Exactly, yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that process being flexible and adaptive is something that machine learning algorithms and AI in the future will do a great job at. We're very bad at that as humans. We usually, it's very hard for us to change and adapt, right? When there's so many complexities in the project. But I think AI and the future will help with that quite a lot.
Do you use any tools for that as project manager? Which tools and programs do you use to support this?
I'm gonna be very biased, and I'm gonna say I use two currently tools, which is our own tools. So I use Swanly and Foxley to plan and prioritize our teamwork. The simple and opinionated interface and the features help us focus on doing rather than spending time setting up. and architecting the solution and burning a lot of time on that. I see this often with some tools. You need to architect the tool deployment before you can even start using it, which, to be honest, is not for every team, especially for a lean and nimble team like ours. We also, apart from our own tools, we also use, for example, Miro boards for brainstorming and such.
Yeah, that's great. So this is the point of resonance that I expected, because that's a slightly same approach as we did with Epic Summer. So keep less organizing, setting up, and make things as flexible as possible. That's great. I like that.
That's one of the things where, I talk to consultants and people that are working in projects and telling me that, and this is a very common occurrence, where a company would need to hire a consultancy team just to architect the deployment of a tool that will be used for a specific process in the organization, which, again, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's an extremely bad thing and no one should do it. Complex tools have their purpose in teams and organizations, especially ones that are bigger. But I don't think it should be status quo. More often than not, you can execute with a tool that's opinionated and that lays down the foundation for you, and you don't have to architect it and structure it and so on and configure it.
Yeah, great. It's yeah, I just had wrote some answer to in the Atlassian community about tailoring and what's the requirements regarding to the tools if you start things adapting to your system, which is talking about smaller parts. And so this is how can these work together? So not every system is some kind of individual, and I like that very much. If we come to that point, handling project, if this is an easy part, especially, of course, with your tools, how do you handle multiple projects at once?
So I think it's not as hard if you have them all in the same picture when you do things like prioritization, when you plan work, when you track progress and so on. For example, all of our apps have views that aggregate some form of data from across multiple projects. I'll give you examples really quickly. Swanly shows all releases and tasks from across projects into a single roadmap view. Foxly allows mixing a backlog of epics and tasks from across multiple projects in order to prioritize them all together. Octo allows managing work components from all of the projects in a single list. Surrey, which is our new released one, shows a portfolio view of all of the projects reporting, including the status rag. And Hedge, which is coming, enables creating risk registers from multiple projects to so you mitigate shared risks. And I think, as you can see, all of our apps have that cross-project integration and visualization part. And I think it comes from the fact that it's in very rare occasions where projects are completely separate from each other in a well-functioning organization, right? So even when we come up with a solution or such, we think of ways of integrating projects integrating together and cross-team collaboration and so on.
How we work with resource management, if you allocate projects to teams, and if they are already busy, how do you handle that?
This might be a very silly answer coming from me, but I would say by descoping less important, less valuable projects. For us, we won't just pile up work. We actually assess the value of these new projects versus the already existing work and basically take decisions as a team on what's most important and what we can shelve for later or completely descope. So that's how we handle it. But we handle it by prioritizing value over density, to put it like that.
Okay. Yeah, that's we have in our own company we have several projects where you do sometimes you need a very tight allocation. So let's do this on Friday at 12 o'clock because then is the time when the customer is expecting you to do it. And on the other hand, there's a lot of stuff where you can give the teams more freedom to to detail micromanagement their tasks on their own. So this is the more easy part. So you give them just so this is the piece of work and this is the end, and see how you can do it. And if it's too much, just tell us, or we make it visual. Which tools do you use for visualization, if you do so?
I think you're gonna hear Jigsaw's apps quite a bit over here, but I think it's not necessarily our own apps, but I'm giving you examples of what I like to see as visualization concepts in applications in general. So I would use other tools as well that have the same kind of criteria. So I would say Swanly for planning work across all of our teams and tracking progress. I call Swanly our extremely visual application because not only do we have a length factor with the timeline view, but there are status symbols, swim lanes, color-coded classifications, substructures, segmented reporting, and all of it neatly packaged in an eye-pleasing user experience. So I think that's what I call a visual tool. That's kind of like the traits and a tiny definition of a visual tool for me.
How do you ensure that everything is rightly allocated in a project?
Well, it depends on what it means to rightly allocate. We don't have many deadlines, and we and basically when priorities come into play, we simply swap work. We have a small team that is in charge of multiple projects, so we prioritize time to be allocated to projects based on prioritization formulas that usually include factors like value added, complexity, and time criticality, if there's any time criticality. As I mentioned, we don't operate that much based on time criticality, but we do use a method, a formula that includes a bunch of factors to figure out what's the most important.
You have to handle a lot of things at the same time. What do you do if you get overwhelmed by too many things at once?
Well, being a small team doing big things and running multiple products, it's often that we get faced with this situation of being overwhelmed with too many projects and tasks to do. And because, as mentioned, time constraints are rarely a factor, we assess and run these projects that bring the most value for the least effort, and we usually shelve or descope the extra weight, to put it like that. And we're used to and okay with it because we are, I would say, call it self-aware. We as a team chose to stay a small team, and that means we can't reasonably handle everything at once. We realize that, and we're completely okay with shelving things and descoping things and so on.
And how do you make sure that you don't drop or miss anything?
Well, by prioritizing across multiple projects, as I mentioned, we use prioritization methods with factors that matter to us, like value to client, impact reach, complexity, and also urgency. But because we're a small team, we don't shy away from dropping things that don't bring the highest value and are complex. And as I mentioned earlier, the urgency is rarely an important factor to us. So we rarely have things that are extremely urgent, and complexity as well. Complexity, when we set complexity, that is a volatile value that we're aware that it would change.
Yeah, handling things by priority and value instead of time constraints on deadlines and something. Wouldn't that lead to a list of things where the end of the list is populated by things that are under less awareness then, that can be maybe forgotten at the end?
But you know what happens in projects usually, and this is one of the things that I feel that a lot of people forget, is that we evolve, projects evolve, products evolve. By the time I reach that list of items that have been left behind, our products is going to be completely evolved to something else. You'd be surprised, at least for us, how many times it happens that those items are not even valid anymore, the ones that we left behind previously. And there is, and when we develop our products, the backlog has this tendency of clearing itself, because the product evolves in a direction where those requirements back then don't make sense anymore.
Okay, great. Yeah, I have this. I have this experience with a few years ago as a Scrum Master. I drove a team that creates a team backlog for things that you should never forget because they are so important. And after half a year, nothing of that items were important enough to resolve. And then I said, okay, instead of discussing these 25 items every time, deciding they're not important right now, let's throw them away. And everyone was slightly annoyed. But after a few days, everyone saw that if they are important again, they will come up again. So there's no problem.
Totally. We had a backlog of things to do with Swanley V2, and we eventually decided, not because there was a huge backlog of things, because of other factors, that we wanted to rebuild the application and construct it into something else, basically from a release management tool into a road mapping solution. So all of a sudden, all of those tens of items that were in the backlog and left there became not valid anymore. So that's what I'm saying is, I think people put a bit too much pressure on themselves and too much importance to things that you've placed as lower importance, or to do later, or to do next year. As you progress, a lot of those items will become invalid.
Yeah, that's interesting. We had a similar situation with Epic SumUp last year, when we majorly improved the detail view editor with a complete new library beyond that. And I think 80% of all feature requests are already bundled in that one. So I have to clean up a lot of things that are not necessary anymore. And this changes, of course, the way that we work with the tools. And so some things get, not valid anymore. I can share that experience. Then if we think about progress, how when the things that we will have a scope, even if it's a volatile one, but you have a scope and you have some overall progress, I'm pretty sure. Do you use progress bars to visualize that?
Yes, we do use progress bars as they're intended, which is progress indicators, not performance evaluators. I think that's a big difference. And we nurture a culture where everyone is working towards being the best version they want to be, and we don't progress track in order to point out performance challenges. we use progress bars to be able to flag risks and issues along the way, and also enable visibility to be able to efficiently address all of these issues that might be arise. So that's the purpose why we use progress trackers.
With working on multiple projects, if there is one thing that you can adapt there in this area, what would that be?
I actually did, when was reading this question, I actually didn't spend too much time thinking about, what that would be. For me, it would be cutting out the noise and seeing the important bits quicker. It's so hard to know what's important and what's not until you evaluate, right? And given projects always evolve, you always evaluate and you're always surrounded by noise, basically.
Yeah, this is exactly so. It turns out that every team and project manager, and in every project there could be completely different measurement points, so that and this is the basis maybe for your progress bar as well, so that you can see those. So we are tracking this on time because we have a release that is planned, and it should be orchestrated with different teams that are even not programming, marketing teams or something. And so it's quite individual, and it can change from project to project. Yeah, that's funny. It gives me a good sense of flexibility, tailoring stuff. That's I think that's one of the things. From your point of perspective, from your point of view, what are the three big trends that you think of should project managers look out for?
So I would say inclusiveness, transparency, and awareness. Running projects, I would say harmoniously, requires more than a select few knowing the plans and taking decisions behind closed doors. You have to include your team in the decision-making process, be open, and also promote transparency. And I believe that inclusion and transparency will lead to more aware and efficient teams. That's where the trend is heading, at least from my ecosphere of view.
If someone's starting out as a project manager, which advice would you give him?
I would say the biggest thing would be, if it doesn't feel right to you, don't put up with it. Be it terrible habits that your company has or your team has, or even say reputable and well-established standards. You don't need safe approach just because your superior heard that all of the companies with the same profile as yours need it. I would say construct an environment that makes sense for your team and the projects that you're in. And also don't be shy to experiment and mutate processes for better when needed. You don't need to follow the pattern all the time. I wish that when I was starting up and I was starting to lead team, I really wish that someone would have told me that, and would have told me that it's okay to think for yourself and not just take what's given to you by a specific methodology or by your manager but by that coach and so on.
Yeah, which is an addition. So yeah, go into it and see. This is going away from dogmas, learning to say no.
Yeah, exactly.
And start thinking about things and how they go, and as long as you understand everything and how the things are tied together, you can change them. So yeah. And you just need to know how to do that. So this is where guys like us come into play. We add more possibilities with tools that are likely to have more flexibility in the own way of working with that.
Yeah.
That's yeah. How do you deal with unpredictable projects midway through?
Well, we do practice risk assessment before we start, as well as along the way ad hoc. As I mentioned earlier, around changing complexity valuations and things like that. We usually have contingency plans for most unpredictable projects, and we also have I would call it a conduct etiquette, which means that there's a process to follow when things go haywire, so no one actually panics and runs around not knowing what to do. And I would say that this conduct etiquette and knowing how to behave when things don't go as planned is a lot more important than even preparing up front, and basically creating hypotheses of what could happen wrong and how to address it. Because as much as you do risk assessment up front, you're never going to be able to cover for all of the potential deviations that the project will have. So how you handle the situation on the spot is a lot more important than being able to cover for risk situations, risk hypotheses up front.
Yeah, it's like in the shipping area, I don't know, but in this area it's like driving on site. So it's like the difference between you cannot calculate some ways through the along the way. You have to see and then adapt. So everyone needs the ability and the awareness to see if things are going out of the way, so that you know when to handle or when to change something. Do you think that AI will play a role in that area in the future, or even yet?
Yeah, for sure. We already do see projects and initiatives around this. Our processes and ways of thinking when making decisions is replicable. We will eventually replace process frameworks with, I would call them, expert algorithms that will not only help to drive more efficient outcomes, but I think will also be a lot more effective at change, basically adapting delivery methods based on how the project is progressing. And we were just talking about that. This is one of our biggest hurdles right now, being able to change direction, change thinking, also process and structures when it's needed. It takes tremendous amount of effort to do it. And I think AI will change that for the better in the future. That's one of the strong beliefs that I have.
So one of the points in having some kind of control over a lot of things, and that would be even worse, so to say, if AI is doing some of the control, is the use of visualization tools for that. What do you think are the benefits of visualization tools?
Well, myself, like many, I am a visual person, right? I understand miles quicker a picture than being explained that picture. I think it's just how we function. And a good visualization tool can speak the equivalent of an entire progress meeting in just 30 seconds, which is powerful, I would say. But I also did say a good visualization tool, because the opposite, an improper one, will instead generate a lot of confusion and probably require more meetings than needed.
Yeah, exactly. This is why I personally being so addicted to these progress bars and markers and everything, because you can see in one glance, are we on track? Are we not on track? How's it the prediction? Are we able to do everything as it follows? And nothing's better than a green light, so to see everything's on track.